time, while breaking news just coming in, Palestinian militant group Hamas has condemned the American strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities as blatant U.S. aggression. In a statement, the group added that the strikes were a dangerous escalation and a flagrant violation of international law and a direct threat to international peace and security. Meanwhile, Israel has announced the closure of its airspace in the aftermath of the strikes. Now, the first reactions from some of the actors in West Asia, just getting in, is the reaction from Palestinian militant group Hamas, who has now condemned the American strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities as blatant U.S. aggression. In a statement, the group added that the strikes were a dangerous escalation and a flagrant violation of international law and a direct threat to international peace and security. Now, these are the breaking news we're coming in. I would like to go back to Professor. We were just discussing, and you had mentioned Houthi and all these elements in West Asia. I want to know your reaction. Is this now, what kind of, escalation are we seeing in the regions, and what actors can actually come into play? Not just, and when I'm talking about that, it's not just the proxies, Iranian proxies, but of course, region-wise, the countries that can get into this. We have Jordan, whose airspace has somehow been involved in this. How do you see this escalate further, and these different actors playing out a role in this whole conflict?
It's very hard to predict. Anything is possible. This could turn into a much broader regional war. We've seen Iran in the past strike these Saudi oil fields. Now China brokered a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia has been condemning the Israeli attacks on Iran. So it's likely that that's not going to happen against Saudis or the United Arab Emirates, but we don't know. So those things are possible. More missiles against Israel. Iran has a finite number of the longer-range missiles that can strike Israel, but it has an abundant amount of the shorter-range missiles that can strike U.S. bases in the area or other countries. So a lot of things are possible at this point. And Iran is a proud nation. I'm no fan of the theocracy that runs Iran. I think it's highly repressive, and not only toward women. But if there's going to be regime change, it needs to come from the Iranian people. We saw how well the last time the U.S. did regime change there. In 1953, when the CIA overthrew Mossadegh, after he had nationalized the British oil industry in Iran, that led to the coming in of the Shah and the repressive regime by the Shah and Savak, which was in power for another 26 years after that the Islamic Republic overthrew. So this kind of instability, where it's happened in the past in Libya, in Yugoslavia, these are in Iraq, Afghanistan. We see the consequences, and they almost never turn out the way that people expected. As Robert Gates, the former U.S. Secretary of Defense and head of the CIA, says, haven't people learned anything from what happened in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya? Don't they understand that these kinds of operations have unintended consequences? And that, so there's clearly Iran's capabilities are weakened. But Iran is a nation of 92 million people. They are a major force in the area. And what a lot of the experts have argued, based on historical studies, is that wars are never won from the air. You always require boots on the ground. Well, who's the boots on the ground going to be? The Israelis don't have the numbers to do that. Does that mean the United States is going to get involved in a war that's overwhelming majority of Americans oppose? So the Israelis are happy, and Trump seems to be happy, and some of the hawks in the United States are happy, but the potential disastrous consequences are yet to be seen.
Absolutely.
And
Now,
let me,
yeah, sure,
can I make one more
absolutely.
point?
Of course you
You
can.
know, because this is all Trump's doing to begin with. The JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal that Obama had negotiated, was working brilliantly. The IAEA, which had hundreds of investigations, including spot investigation without any warning, said that Iran was complying with the terms. Under that deal, Iran could only enrich to 3.67% and have a limited amount and a limited number of centrifuges. And what does Trump do? He blows it up. And then he comes in now and says he wants to negotiate a better deal than Obama's deal. But he draws a red line and says zero enrichment is going to be allowed. That was not a serious negotiation. There was never any way that the Iranians could accept giving up their right to enrich nuclear energy. If Trump had any brains and capability, he could have worked out a deal where Iran would enrich to a very, very low amount, and there'd be heavy, intrusive inspections, so we knew that they weren't cheating. Under the old deal, they were more than a year away from developing nuclear weapons.
Right.
But even now, the U.S. intelligence community said that they did not have a weapons program. But Trump wanted to do this, and as did Bibi Netanyahu want to do this.
And I have because you mentioned that, I have a question just on the same basis. Now, the agency, the Iranian Atomic Agency, has said that the development of nuclear industry will not be stopped despite the evil plots of its enemies. According to you, was this strike successful in its aim to stop, perhaps, or paralyze a nuclear ambition? And is Israel now content with it?
We need to wait till we find out tomorrow how much was actually destroyed. The U.S. is saying one thing, the Iranians are saying something very, very different. If it is, as the U.S. says, successful in totally obliterating the Fordo facility, it will set Iran back for a year or two, or even 3 or 4 years. However, it will almost certainly guarantee that Iran develops a bomb program and rushes as fast as they can to develop a nuclear bomb. That's in nobody's interest. I don't want to see that. If that happens, not only does that pose a threat to Israel, but then we'll see Saudi Arabia, United Emirates, Egypt, Turkey, all developing their own nuclear weapons. You look at a state like North Korea. North Korea was so much more backward than Iran. Their economy is minuscule compared to Iran's. Their nuclear scientists were much less capable than the Iranian nuclear scientists, and North Korea was able to develop a bomb. Iran will also be able to develop a bomb. And what the United States and Israel have done is almost certainly to guarantee that Iran takes that course, which will be a disaster for the world if that happens.
Absolutely. And this is seems to be, well, Israel did want, and even Trump did say that we don't want any nuclear weapons from in Iran's hand. I mean, it seems like this attack has not really done any good to that. It's almost has done damage to the whole idea. Then again, the question seems to be, is it possible to actually obliterate nuclear sites in Iran?
It is possible, based on what I know. It could be done. But you can't obliterate nuclear knowledge. You can't obliterate know-how. I mean, so they can set the Iranian program back for years, but in doing so, they give Iran greater incentive than ever to go forward with the nuclear program in developing a bomb, which now they weren't doing. I mean, that's why if Trump was honest and competent, then we could have achieved that goal without U.S. attacking. Iran desperately wanted a deal in which it was happy to give up its enriched uranium. It was going to ship out the 60% enriched uranium, the 20% enriched uranium, go down to a very limited amount, and then so that it could use for its nuclear energy program and then some of its research reactors. You know, it was more than willing to do that if Trump was willing to negotiate honestly. But as soon as he says zero enrichment, then that's not going to happen.
Well, of course, we'll have to see what kind of reaction we see from Iran. It doesn't seem though it's going to be any more. It's not going to be settled any sooner. And we've been seeing reactions from U.S. They've not really been happy, especially even the Americans for that matter. But of course, we'll have to see and wait and see what happens. But
and globally, the U.S. is going to be such a pariah now for this attack because the world population was opposed to this as well. And you'll see the global south, you'll see most of the world, except for that handful of Europeans who met in Canada last week with the U.S. and the Canadians. You know, they're the ones who are the war hawks in this, but much of the rest of the world is strongly opposed to this. And the U.S., which is already in a morally weakened position, like the Israelis because of the slaughter in Gaza, and now this on top of it is only going to weaken the U.S. position in the world and any kind of role that it might have played.
All right. Well, there's so much to discuss. Unfortunately, we don't really have much time, but I really appreciate you coming on the broadcast and giving your insights on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.